Next, we're going to add this aging detail to this sign we just created. I'm going to make a selection of it, and I'm going to use the background as my reference. So I'm going to hold down the Command key. I'll click on the sign background, the first one we made, and I'm going to go to the top of the layer order. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy Merged, and then I'm going to paste it. Now what I have is a complete copy of text and art, and that's going to allow me to put those details in. Now I'm just going to gather in the layers that I used to compose this. I've shift selected all the ones that made it. Here's the solid complete sign at the top. And when I've done that, I'm going to go down and I'm going to add it to a group folder. And I'll name it Sign Parts, and I'm going to turn it off. Photoshop is non-destructive editing, and what that translates into, we can always go back and re-edit and change if we maintain the original layers. Now we're going to work on a single layer on which all the content appears. Now we did this with the dollar bill in our editorial tutorial, so I'm going to go ahead and I will add a new blank layer above, and I'm going to get my lasso tool, and I'm going to start by maybe making a crease shape through the right hand side. I'm probably going to use black for the values I want for this. I'll get a soft edge brush, and I'm going to drop the opacity down to about 10%, and I'll just start to add these details. Now at this point, it's really up to you to start developing these components. So I'm going to go in and add a few more of these just randomly throughout the document. And then we're going to add a little bit of rust using the dissolve brush and some of the layer styles. All right, so I would probably go a little bit further than this, so I'm going to, and then I'll return and we'll put the rust in. Now I've got to add the rust I want, so I'm going to put a new layer in for that. And I'm going to get my brush, I'll hit B. I'm going to set the mode to dissolve, and I'll set the opacity to about 50%. And I'm going to choose a brown. Now I've chosen this brown, and if you want to punch that in as well, you're welcome to. Go to your color picker, and you'll see the number letter configuration down here in the active blue box. And if you would put that number in, you'll have exactly the same setting as I. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to go in and start to paint in a couple of places perhaps. Maybe I'll make it a little denser in some places. This is where it's kind of random and it's really up to you. Now once I've introduced that, I'm going to put the outer glow on this. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit so it's a little bit easier to see. And I'll double click on the layer, and I'm going to click on outer glow. And what I've done is I've set the color to black. The opacity I'm going to set to 50%. And the spread, I've got the spread at about, I'm going to go with maybe 7, and the size maybe 5. And I'll click OK. Now I'm going to find a blend mode that works for this. So I'll make sure that I'm on my move tool to initiate this. And if I were to hold down my shift key and hit plus or minus, I can quickly go through those blend modes. Now I'm going to stop at multiply because I want the translucence of being able to see the bike as well. So once I've done that, I'm going to set my opacity. So I'm going to hit V, and I think I'll drop it down to about maybe 80%, and I'll hit Command S to save. So we should have something like this. Now there are a couple of the details that I want to create, and one of which, if we were to look at the template or the PDF, are these little chips where the paint is coming off the surface. And what we're going to be using is our gray background in addition to the sign itself. So once we punch holes in this using a layer mask, we'll be able to see the gray, and we'll be able to accomplish that. So to do that, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to get rid of where I've gone over the edge of the sign with the creases that I've created. Now to do that, I'll want to go into my template folder where I've got all the other components, and I'm going to way down to the bottom, and I'm going to Command select the original sign background. Now when I go to the layer with the entire sign, I can now select inverse. And when I hit delete, it gets rid of anything that goes outside the edge of the sign. I'm going to deselect, I'm going to save. Now I'm going to put a layer mask on that. And now I'm going to zoom in and start to put some of those details in. I'm going to start, and then I'll return once I've done what I want. And during the interim, you'll go in and introduce your own variations on this based on what we do here now and looking at the tutorial PDF as well. So I'm going to go in and just make a shape. Maybe I'll have a piece kind of come out of the sign itself. I'm going to hit B on the keyboard. I'll make sure my brush has returned back to 100% opacity. I'm going to make sure that I've got pure black and white on my toolbar by hitting D and then putting the white on top, by clicking on the little hooked arrow by the swatches, or hitting X. Now I'll go in and I'll knock that out. One other thing, I'm going to change my brush back to normal, and I'm going to choose a brush with a hard edge. Now I'm going to deselect because I want to add another component to this as I do this. I would like this to look a little bit more weathered. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to double click on the layer to initiate the layer styles. Once again, I'll put outer glow on this. And you can see now that it's giving us a little bit of a edge where we delete. It gives a bit of a shadow. Makes it look more like the metal edge is showing through. I'm also going to put the inner glow in on this, and I'm going to back this way off. I'm going to take the choke off. I'm going to use my opacity about 80% black. And these are all things that are subjective to your changes. Now I'm going to change the size of that. I'll reel that in a bit, because what I would like this to look like is that just where the paint is chipped off, it's also gray on the paint surface. So I'm going to drop it down to about 4. I might even drop my opacity down from 80 a bit. I think I'll drop down to about 50, and I'll hit return. Now, when I go in and start to make more edits here, and I use my layer mask, the results will be, I get that effect in that area as well. Now we also have to deal with the rust layer, but we'll do that once we get these little components added. Now, very often when paint chips, you might not get a complete piece coming out like that, so you'll see in the PDF that will accompany this bicycle file, the chips are kind of retrieved a bit as well. So I'll hit X on the keyboard, I'll get my brush, and I'll paint that piece back, and I'll deselect and save. So if I zoom back on this now, I'm starting to get these effects. I'm going to add a few more of these, and then we'll return and put the rivets in the upper left-hand corners that would hold this to the wall. Use your tutorial file for reference to give you an idea on how to proceed with this. All right, so I've added those little paint chips and cracks in the sign to give it a little bit more age. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put screws in the upper left and right hand corner where it'll appear to have been attached to the wall of our interior. I'm going to make sure I'm back on the thumbnail with the actual picture and off the layer mask. I'm going to hit M on the keyboard, and I'm going to get my elliptical marquee. I'm going to Option Shift drag a little bit of a circle. The size is insignificant because we'll change these once we've initiated the shape we want. I'm going to drag this to a wider area of the sign because we're going to be using the outer glow and bevel and embossed to give it a dimension, and the bevel will give us the shading on the surface that we need. So once I've got that created and located, I'm going to hit Command J. And what you'll see now, because we've got the outer glow and inner glow on the surface of the sign, it appears immediately on that sphere or that ellipse, pardon me. I'm going to zoom in on that. And I'm going to next apply the bevel and emboss to it. So once again, I'll double click on the layer, and now I'm going to put bevel and emboss on. Now, we can leave the same settings we had prior. You'll notice that these settings remain the same from previous use unless you make an effort to change them. And that works pretty well. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to get my marquee tool once again. And much the same the way we created our doorknob, I'm going to use the rectangle marquee to score through the center of this and then delete it so it looks like a screw. I'm going to deselect it. I'll tuck this one in my upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to scale it down so it looks believable. This is kind of big and ridiculous, so you'll have to use your own best judgment for the proportion on this. Don't make it too big, it'll look silly. Now I need another one over on the other side. So I'll grab my marquee, make a very broad selection, hit V. I'll hold down the Option and the Shift and drag another copy over to the far right-hand corner. And I'm going to rotate it a little bit differently. These are the things we need to watch out for in illustration, and particularly 3D content for game environments. Things can look repetitive if we don't make an effort to change them a little bit. Now we've got our sign completed, and all we need to do is make a complete copy of it. And then when we get into class on Monday, we will introduce it to the rest of our interior. I'm going to turn off the background layer for a moment, and I'm going to apply the layer mask to the model of the sign itself. So I'm going to go to that layer with everything on it, and I'll right click on the mask and choose Apply Layer Mask. I'll hold down the Command key. I'll click on the thumbnail to make a selection around the perimeter, and I'm going up to the very top, and I'm going to choose Edit Copy Merged, and then Edit Paste or Command V. And if I were to hold down the Option key and click just on the eyeball with that newly generated sign, I can see that now I've got everything self-contained. I'm going to save this as a ping and put it in my folder. I'll go to File, Save As, and I'm going to go to my project folder, no compression, click OK.